There are different kinds of loss. There's the loss that comes suddenly, violently, leaving you gasping for air. And then there's the loss that comes slowly, day by day, as someone you love slips away while still sitting right next to you. As their eyes look at you without recognition, as they become a stranger wearing a familiar face. Margaret Hayes was 72 years old when she walked onto the Britain's Got Talent stage, guiding a wheelchair. In that wheelchair sat her husband, Robert, 75, his hands resting in his lap, his eyes vacant and distant. He wore a neat cardigan and pressed trousers, dressed with obvious care by someone who loved him, but his expression was empty, lost, like someone trying to remember something just beyond reach. The audience fell quiet immediately. This wasn't a typical audition. This was something else. Something that made people uncomfortable, because it reminded them of their own fears, their own aging parents, their own mortality. Simon sat at the judge's table, his expression already shifting from curiosity to concern. He recognized what he was seeing. Everyone past a certain age recognized it. Dementia. Alzheimer's. The cruelest theft of all. Taking not life, but memory. Identity. The very essence of who someone is. The host approached gently, his usual enthusiasm tempered by obvious respect for the situation. "Welcome to Britain's Got Talent. Please, tell us your names." "I'm Margaret Hayes," she said, her voice steady but carrying the weight of exhaustion that comes from years of caregiving. "And this is my husband, Robert. We've been married for 53 years. 53 years, the host repeated softly. "That's beautiful. Can you tell us a bit about why you're here today?" "We will answer." Margaret looked down at her husband. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, and he didn't react. He simply stared ahead, his expression unchanged. "Robert has Alzheimer's disease," Margaret said, and her voice cracked slightly on the word. "He was diagnosed 6 years ago. It's progressed quickly. He doesn't remember our children. He doesn't remember our home. He doesn't remember our wedding day." She paused, steadying herself. "He doesn't remember me." The audience sat in heavy silence. Several people were already wiping their eyes. At the judges' table, one of the female judges had her hand pressed to her mouth. Simon's arms, usually crossed in critical assessment, hung at his sides. His face showed something rare. Helplessness. "Every day I lose a little bit more of him," Margaret continued. "But there's one thing, just one thing, that sometimes brings him back for a moment. Music. Specifically the song we danced to at our wedding. 53 years ago we danced to Unforgettable by Nat King Cole. And sometimes, when I sing it to him, I see something in his eyes, just for a second, like he's trying to find his way back to me." She looked at the host, then at the judges, tears now flowing freely. "I know this isn't a normal audition. I know we're not going to win. But I needed to do this. I needed to sing our song to him one more time, in front of people. Because I need witnesses to the fact that we existed, that what we had was real, that even though he can't remember, I remember enough for both of us." The theater was absolutely silent except for the sound of people crying. This wasn't about entertainment. This was about bearing witness to love in its most painful form. "Will you be singing today?" the host asked, his own voice thick with emotion. "Unforgettable. Our wedding song. The last connection I have to the man I married." The host nodded and stepped back, unable to say more. Margaret positioned herself beside her husband's wheelchair. She took his hand, gently. He didn't squeeze back. His fingers remained limp in hers. But she held on anyway, the way she'd been holding on for 6 years. The backing track began. The iconic opening notes of Unforgettable filled the theater. and Margaret began to sing. Her voice was untrained but honest, weathered by age, but carrying an emotion that no amount of technical skill could replicate. She sang about being unforgettable, about lingering in someone's memory like a song, and everyone in that theater understood the cruel irony of those lyrics. She sang directly to Robert, her eyes never leaving his face, searching desperately for some flicker of recognition, some sign that the man she'd loved for over half a century was still in there, somewhere. Robert stared ahead blankly. No reaction, no recognition, nothing. Margaret's voice wavered, but she pushed through. She sang about how incredible and unbelievable it was to be loved by someone, and tears streamed down her face as she sang words that her husband could no longer understand. The audience was destroyed. Grown men sobbed openly. Women clutched their partners. The judges sat motionless, transfixed by this raw display of devotion and heartbreak. Simon's hand moved to cover his eyes. His shoulders shook slightly. For the first time in 20 years of judging, he was crying before the performance was even finished. Margaret reached the bridge, her voice growing stronger despite her tears, as if pushing all her love and all her grief into these final verses. She sang about being unforgettable too, about this being their moment, and she squeezed Robert's hand tighter, willing him to remember, begging him silently to come back to her for just one more second. And then something miraculous happened. Robert's fingers twitched. His vacant eyes focused slightly. His head turned, slowly, toward Margaret's voice. His lips moved, trying to form words that wouldn't come. And then, in a voice rough with disuse and confusion, he said one word. Maggie. Her childhood nickname, the name he'd called her for 53 years, the name no one else used. Margaret's voice broke completely. She stopped singing, her hand flying to her mouth, her entire body shaking with sobs. Maggie, Robert said again, his eyes clearing for just a moment. I remember you. The theater erupted, not with applause, but with a sound that was part cheer, part sob, part prayer. Everyone was on their feet, crying, witnessing a miracle that they knew would only last seconds. Simon stood up and walked onto the stage. He wasn't crying anymore. Tears were streaming down his face without restraint. He approached the couple and knelt beside Robert's wheelchair. Robert, Simon said gently, do you know who this is? Robert looked at Margaret, his expression struggling, fighting through the fog. My Maggie. My wife. That's right, Simon said, his voice breaking. This is your wife, and she loves you very much. Robert's hand, which had been limp, suddenly gripped Margaret's tightly. I love you too, he said, the words coming from some deep place that Alzheimer's hadn't reached yet. I don't know why, but I know I love you. Margaret collapsed into his lap, her arms around him, sobbing. I love you, Robert. I love you so much. I'll never stop loving you. Simon stood and turned to the audience, not bothering to wipe his face. This is, he said, his voice rough and broken. This is what forever looks like. Not the good days, not the easy days, but this. Loving someone when they can't remember why you matter. Showing up every single day for someone who doesn't know who you are. Table, and pressed the golden buzzer. But this time, when the confetti fell and the music played, no one cheered. They simply stood in reverent silence, honoring what they'd witnessed. Simon returned to Margaret, who was still holding her husband, and he placed his hand on her shoulder. Thank you for sharing him with us, Simon said quietly. Thank you for showing us what real love looks like. Margaret looked up at him, her face wet with tears, but her expression almost peaceful. He came back, she whispered. Just for a minute. He came back. He did, Simon confirmed, and we all saw it. We're all witnesses. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, Robert had slipped back into his fog. His eyes were distant again, his grip on Margaret's hand loosening. But Margaret held on, and would continue holding on, for however long she had left with him. Simon arranged for the finest Alzheimer's care facilities to provide support for Margaret. He funded research into music therapy for dementia patients. He made sure that Margaret and Robert's story was told with dignity and respect, sparking conversations about caregiving, about dignity in decline, about loving someone through the unimaginable. The episode became required viewing in medical schools and care facilities around the world. It changed how people understood Alzheimer's, not as an ending, but as a different kind of relationship, one where love continues even when memory fails. Margaret continued to sing to Robert every day until he passed away 2 years later. And even though he rarely had moments of recognition again, she sang anyway. Because that's what forever means. It means showing up. It means loving someone even when they can't love you back. It means being unforgettable, even to someone who has forgotten. At Robert's funeral, they played the recording of Margaret's Got Talent performance. The moment when he said Maggie. The moment when he said, I remember you. The moment when love proved stronger than disease, even if only for a heartbeat. Simon attended the funeral, sitting in the back, and when the video played, he cried again. Because some moments are so powerful, so pure, so painfully beautiful, that they never stop hurting, even years later. LGBTQ happy. Yes. Years after that, when interviewers asked Simon about his most memorable moment in 20 years of judging, he would always reference Margaret and Robert. Not because of talent, not because of performance, but because they proved that some things, love, devotion, the promise of in sickness and in health, those things are stronger than any disease, any tragedy, any loss. Because that night on the Britain's Got Talent stage, Margaret Hayes didn't just sing a song. She showed the world what it means to love someone without condition, without guarantee of recognition, without hope of reciprocation. She showed us that forever isn't about both people remembering. Sometimes forever is just about one person refusing to forget. And Robert, for just one miraculous moment, proved that love lives in places deeper than memory. That even when the mind forgets, the soul remembers. That Maggie and I remember you are sometimes the most powerful words in the English language. That's not entertainment. That's the human experience at its most vulnerable and most beautiful. And sometimes, just sometimes, television captures lightning in a bottle and reminds us all what we're fighting for when we promise someone forever. Even when forever means loving a stranger with your husband's face. Even when forever means singing to someone who doesn't know your name. Even when forever hurts more than anything in the world. Because that's what love is. And Margaret Hayes understood that better than anyone.